Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Kode execution 07. Video dulu.
There is no like question mark and parameters like something like that,
Video dulu.
or hacker like that. People assume that this page is completely static, and this is not true at all. Especially with recent frameworks, a lot of mapping is done like that. So that's probably like the name of a function, and then that's probably some parameter you're passing to it. So it's really important to keep in mind that even if there's no parameter, like as in question mark and name equals value, there is still variable in that URL. And that's why we should try to inject in it. So let's try to see what happens if we put a double quote. We get an internal server error. So that's a pretty good sign that something
Sign-nya bagus kok, jangan server. Oke. Oke nih.
fishy is going on. Let's try with a simple quote, and here we can see that it's reflected it here. So let's go back to the double quote because it looks a lot more interesting. So here we can see that, okay, if we put a double quote, we get a server error. So one good way to go about this is to try to find something that will not trigger an error anymore. So let's think. A double quote is breaking the syntax. So what happens if we put another one? And here we're back. It works again. And what happens if we put plop here, for example? Here we got the value. Okay. Now that we managed to not have an error anymore, we can probably try to inject something that is a bit more interesting. So let's try, for example, to do a plus and another quote. The thing is that if we send a plus, the server will think it's a space, so we need to encode it. So %2b, and still, okay, it doesn't break, everything works pretty well. So let's try another plus, and we're gonna put another string in the middle. Now that's a pretty good sign that
Tes. Ini plus. Mana plus? Oh, jadi ini kode decoder. URL mana URL? Persen 2b. Oke. it's internal server error. Ada something situ. Oke lah, kita cari dulu.
But yeah, something odd is happening. Let's remove the double quote and let's try 1 and plus 1. And here we got an error. So let's start Python. And let's take a string hacker. Let's do what we're doing here. 1 plus here, and then that's it. Oh, and then let's correct. Okay, so here we can see that if we try to do that on a local Python, we get an error as well. So let's, instead of hammering the server again and again and again, let's try to fix that locally. So it's trying to convert an int to a string. So let's try to help Python to get that properly. Oh, and then let's correct. Okay, so here we can see that if we try to do that on a local Python, we get an error as well. So let's, instead of hammering the server again and again and again, let's try to fix that locally. So it's trying to convert an int to a string. So let's try to help Python to get that properly. And here it works. And we can see that we have str of 1 plus 1, 2, and we can see hacker2 here. So let's try that.
Nggak jalan ya.
Here to see if it works here. And we got the same thing. So now that we can get something, we can probably try to say, okay, maybe you can turn that into a code execution, because we're already doing basics math. So let's try to go a bit further. So we're gonna do something like OS system and run very simple command ID and get the response and see what happened. So we get an error again. So let's go back there. Oh, name OS is not defined. So here it's probably a problem because we don't have the OS library imported. So here on the command line we can do import OS, but that's not gonna work when we attack the server. But one thing we can do is use __ import, then the name of what we want to import, and then do system dot system, and then the command we want to run. And here it works. So if we just move that here to replace OS, we keep the dot, and here we run it. We keep the dot. So if we just move that here,
tinggal import baik.
To replace OS, we keep the dot, and here we run it. We got a 0, so that's a really good sign because it means that the command ran successfully. We see that the command returned successfully, or at least that's what we think, but we kind of want to see the result of what happens when we run the command, because that's interesting and that's gonna help us pivot to go further. So instead of using system, we're gonna use popen, and here we're gonna add read.
Okay, popen read.
And here we can see the result of the id command. uid
Popen. Oke. Ini tinggal jalanin ini berarti kodenya. Oke, udah beres, selesai.
So now let's see if we can as well read the content of etc passwd, and here we got the content, so no problem. If you got this, you should be able to replace that command with the command used to score, and you should be able to complete that exercise. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed learning with PentesterLan.
Oke, beres.